so that we can invite the
Okay.
speaker. Right. So,
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome, Dr. Sana and Dr. Noor Khan, the distinguished guest speaker. Yeah, today
Thank you.
our today our this webinar is on crafting the literature review. How can we do a literature review? How would we understand that we are going in the right way? What are the different inclusion and exclusion criteria? For example, how would you come to know about the various databases exist, and how of the various databases, which papers are relevant to you in terms of context, in terms of the authors who are the leaders in the domain? So all these things will be, inshallah, we'll explaining in that webinar. So let me just introduce the speakers with you people, and then we can ask our guest speaker to formally start with it. So this webinar, as I mentioned earlier, that is, it is actually based on the crafting a literature review, but that literature review is actually the systematic literature review. We are more concerned with the systematic literature review, that how can we conduct a systematic literature review. So we have the moderator for this session. I myself, Dr. Haider Shah. I am currently assistant professor in Bahri University and research cell coordinator as well. I am co-heading the knowledge center along with the Dr. Sana, that OB. And I did my PhD from University of Malaya, having more than 10 years experience and several publications in impact factor and HEC Scopus databases. Then we have the second moderator, that is Dr. Sana Aruz Khattak. She is also assistant professor in management sciences department, co-head along with me in the knowledge center of organizational behavior. She has also has a good experience of publication and several publication impact factor journals, HEC recognized journals, and international journals. And she has having the more than 9 years academia and industry. So now I would like to introduce my distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Noor Khan, who is assistant professor in NUST Business School. He obtained his PhD in management and HRM from one of the top university in Malaysia, which is University Technology Malaysia, which we call normally UTM. He has been teaching human resource related subjects, and mostly are based on the cases from the Harvard Business Review. He has multiple publication in the impact factor journal, Scopus index journals, as well as in the HEC recognized journal. In addition to it, he is well equipped with the qualitative and quantitative research methods, and particularly the data analysis techniques using the latest software which are available, which we recommend to the different students, that is Smart PLS, MOS 24, and Vivo. These are the latest software. A very few people have a command on it, and our distinguished guest speaker has expertise in that, and he used to conduct different workshops on it. And he has also participated and sessioned different conferences as a session chair, and he has a multiple exposure to the different countries, and it's a kind of blessing for us to having that kind of speaker with us. So be mindful of everything and notice down everything. Today we will be more inclined towards the application version, and along with the basic we will go for the application, that how can you do actually the literature review properly, what are the different things and how to approach it. And mostly I would recommend the student that ask the question, as we would be having long session for the question answer session. So take advantage of that opportunity, and you can ask the trainer about the different things. So let me just call the distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Noor Khan.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I won't be taking long on the introduction part.
Yes,
Some of my students, which I'm supervising, I think from NUST, maybe a couple of students will be there too.
yes.
I think Dr. Heather has already introduced me, so I won't be taking long on introducing, but currently I'm working as an assistant professor at NUST, right?
Yeah.
My PhD is from Malaysia, University Technology Malaysia. So much of my experience has come from ASEAN, like through conference management system publication, and then particularly teaching. And now currently I'm with NUST since last for 2 years. I have joined back in 2019 in January. So let me just introduce first the area which we'll be doing too. Basically, we'll be looking into literature review. So what I have decided to uh, had a practice sessions last time I had, and then I come up with the idea, why not to be more hands-on experience rather than, so I'll be sharing the slides as well, so might be that help you later on if you are going through. So probably we'll have a 30 minutes or something. I'll be discussing slides and give you the background, and then after that we'll be formally into the web sciences session, where I'll practically teach you how we should do a systematic literature. But remember one thing, we're not looking into uh, how to write a paper. So that session we can do some other time, because that's a different area where you would like to write a systematic literature review paper. But today we'll be looking into it, especially for those students who are into MS programs or PhD, who have just decided their research area, or they're looking into it. So I think I would like to keep the session more interactive in a way that, let's say, kindly keep your mic off so that will be better. Okay, so point to make it that today I would like to make it more interactive, so you can stop me anywhere you want. Although we'll have a formal session for the question answer, but my point to make it, I want to make it more integrative in a way that, in case you would like to ask about how to choose your topic, which method I should choose, mixed method, quantitative, qualitative, why should I use it and how should I use it? So multiple set of question, and then the most important question that bother the students, the issues that bothering the MS and PhD student, how to come up with a gap, the research gap, which is more important, because no matter how many articles you read, at the end of the day, you need to be smart. You need some set of skills where you should know how to get the gap part, right? Because nobody's reading for you. The database is over 10,000 millions of articles there. So I will teach you practically how we did through and how we've been through the that part as well. Because now globally in the top kiosk ranked universities, if you go through a PhD program, then it's not just good enough to do a normal literature and then convince your advisor or supervisor to come up with your research area. So they want you to go through systematic literature review. Now, most of the resources might be not available at your universities, or are, but that's not an issue. Once you know how to do it, then probably if some of the students which are the nearby vicinity in Islamabad, you're always welcome. You can drop by my office at NUST. We can help you. Or if you get a resource, maybe some of your colleagues, they're studying overseas, they can help you also to get with access. So I think getting access might be sought out at a later stages, but first you should know how we should use it. So very quickly, I think I have to share my screen, so then I'll through. Okay, let me just very quickly also, I'll be sharing the link with Dr. Heather, but it's very particular for those scholars or researcher. Last year, I've been to Australia and we had a conference over there. So I'm part of the kind of committee members. So they're sharing materials with me. So they have I just received the alert today. They have a workshop on 27 October, right? The time is given there. I'll forward the link to Heather. They will share with you. So it's a very important conference regarding, research and other matters, how things globally, shaping up. So if you are interested, it's a free of cost. You can just join in later. I'll be sharing. I just get it during the meeting, so I thought better to be shared with you people. Okay. So now I hope so. The screen is visible, right?
Yes, doctor, it's visible.
Okay, so the topic we'll be looking into today, and Doctor, please stop me where you believe that I can come up with kind of answers, or maybe the time limitation, because I'm not reading the clock.
Right,
Okay.
sure, sir.
And request the participant, please, if they can keep their mic off. That will be.
Yeah, please, participant. Yeah, participant, please. Please put your mic on silent all unless you need to ask the question, please. Right? Thank you. Yes, Dr. Noor, you can continue now.
Okay, so today the topic we'll be discussing, or today's session is about how to do a systematic literature review. Although we'll be looking into also how we do traditionally and what's the difference between the two. So let's just begin with the learning outcomes. So I'll just be, okay. So the key learning outcome from this session would be we need to understand basically literature review, the traditional mode. Then we need to know about the systematic literature review. Then we have a systematic literature workflow, how things can be sought out. And then what are the key tools or techniques that will be used to do a literature review. And then finally, we'll go with a practice session. So now, the first thing, the discussion will be the discourse at the end and maybe somewhere in the middle. This is all about today. We'll be discussing what is literature review is the first thing. The second thing is that why and how we should do literature review. It's more important, how and why. So these two questions we will try to answer during the discussion that we have today. And then we'll be looking what are the key challenges basically today to the researchers or to the scholars when they're writing theses or when they're doing research. So what are the keys, potential areas of challenges where they should look into. If you look into why literature is important, so the first thing we need to look into the key research steps by Criswell. We have key 6 steps when you do a research or when you write a paper. That begins with how to identify the problem statement or how to identify your research problem. So we have a broader area and then we narrow it down using, we call it the funnel approach. So first you have to choose a broader area and then we narrow it down. But for that, it's important to read some literature. So it's always important that I'm trying to tell you how significant is this as a step of research to read a literature. So it's one of the key steps that right after even we do literature, a very quick literature before we start a proper review, but for how to justify your research problem, we do that first. So it's one of the key and integral step in a research processes. What is a literature? Okay, what is a literature review? Okay, so I just want to fix this. Basically, a literature review, when we look into a traditional definition by Hurt 1998, I'm not talking about a systematic now. So basically anything, you can call it information, knowledge, or any sort of documents. When you would like to select those documents, both that is published, unpublished, we are not looking at where quality sort of criteria, but whatsoever available on the World Web in terms of books, written, published, non-published material. So that all comes in a under the paradigm, under the broader area of literature review. And why is it important? Why we do it? Because we would like to look into a particular standpoint, a particular perspective to enrich our views, or also to investigate our research questions or a particular topic we are looking into. So basically, in a traditional way, when we talk about literature, we're not particularly looking to most of the students or researcher, when you ask them about literature, so they straight away talked about research papers. So research paper is one of the refined form of the literature available, but we have multiple sources because in the past, since we don't have much connectivity, we don't have much resources, so we'll be reading books, magazine, even newspaper, anything that can help you to reach to the problem or to look into your problem basically. So as I mentioned, the role of the literature is beyond the research process. Like, when you identify a problem, you know what is the problem is, but then you have to justify. So for that, you need to read a literature. When you would like to formulate your hypotheses, then for that, you need a literature to justify. When you define your framework, your proposed model, then you need a literature to justify. Basically, you would like to look into underpinning theory. And that's for that, you need to review a literature. So I mean to say, in a nutshell, basically, the scope of this step of research process is, we call it with a global magnitude. So it's beyond the particular way of how we do research. So This is what the literature is all about. So you have to count everything. This is another what we teach normally. These days I'm teaching research course at NUST as well. So this is a very typical or traditional way of looking into literature by Criswell, 2013, right? His book, he mentioned this one, Educational Research by Criswell. So the first step he mentioned that you have to identify your key terms, because most of the time as a beginner, we're searching concept with the wrong labels. I'll just give you a small example, because my research area is green human resource, or these OCBE, green behaviors, pro environmental behavior. So if I would like to search a particular concept, so there are multiple labels available. I'll give you example of green behaviors. Now, if somebody would like to do a research on green behavior, you get into a Google database, Google Scholar, you get into Web of Sciences, you get into Scopus, you get into any other top publisher like Springer, Emerald Valley, whatever. Then it's more important for you to get that concept, or to get particular resource. You need to use correct labels. Like, I mean, it's very important here. Let's say you would like to research on green behaviors. Now there are multiple labels that use for green behavior. The first label, let's say eco behaviors, right? Another behavior is ecological behaviors, right? Then we have OCBE, organizational citizenship for environment, right? So I mean to say the concept is the same, but they have used different labels. So until and unless you're not putting the correct label, that's we also can call it jargons. But normally, if you see when we talk about research variables construct, so we need that particular term to search. So it's important that irrespective of the area you're doing a research, basically you have to come up with the correct label. If you're doing a qualitative, then you can call it a theme. But if you're doing a quantitative, so we call it to a key terms. So you can call it also variable at a later stage, but initially I would say key terms. So when you use key terms, so maybe there are lots of umbrella concepts. So you may not be able to cover with a single term the whole concept, as I mentioned. So you have to apply all the key terms in a Google Scholar or any sort of engine you're using for your research. So the first thing, basically, to label your key term. That's the first step. Now, to look at the literature, now it's very important again which database you're using, because we are always avoiding resources like Wikipedia, encyclopedia, or any sort of resource where we fear that there will be issues with the validity of the data. Plus, you cannot cite as a researcher anything if you don't have a source in terms of citation or references. So it's very important for researcher, when you are locating your literature, that which sort of key databases you're using. So that's again a question of priority. You have access to Web of Sciences, yes or not? You have access, but most of you probably would have access to Google Scholar because everybody's using it. So make sure that you have to choose an appropriate database where you believe, like, let's just give example of, I'm teaching to the undergrad course. So when you are talking about education research, so it's one of the American database called ERIC. So ERIC is a resource where you can use when you are doing research in an education environment. Let's say you're teaching, you're studying the what do you call the students' behavior inside the school, or any sort of, I would say, when we talk about research in academia, or especially in terms of universities, schools, that can be tertiary, that can be primary, that can be higher education. So we normally follow to go with ERIC, because Google database is a generalized database that connect you everywhere. So my point to make it here, locating the literature, it's very important. You must know in which area you're working. Let's say you're working in educational area in terms of research. You're working in schools, universities. It's a better resource to use ERIC rather than Google Scholar or any other. Another example of, let's say if you're a medical student, right? Although most of you will be business students, so you have to use PubMed. That's a resource where particularly for the medical students. For business and social sciences, we normally have databases like Springer, Jester, we have Emerald. Okay, so we have lots of Endoscience, this recent publisher called MDPI. So For the business student, we have particular databases. So if let's say you're a very good researcher, you know everything, but the tool you are using is not meant to be used for you, then mean you're wasting your time. So we call this approach smart in research. Let's say I'll give a small example that comes from my supervisor. In research, we used to see you have to use things effectively. I'll be coming to some key hallmarks of research that discussed by Sekaran. We say parsimony of your research model. Now, parsimony mean it's one of the key step of research. One of the step is called rigor, how rigor your research is, rigorous. Hallmark in the parsimony of the model, basically, when you do research as a researcher, you don't have unlimited resources. So you have a very particular set of resources in terms of time, money, and then your skill as a researcher. So you have to be very smart in approach. Let's say you're killing your time by using the wrong database, or by using the wrong software, or by choosing the incorrect method. You cannot, I mean, whatever your research question, that will tell you which sort of method you should use. So my point here is that choosing appropriate tools, it's very important. I'll come to the example. I just forgot that. Like, let's say you have to cut an apple, right? Now, cutting an apple, you don't need a sophisticated machine. You just need a simple knife to cut the apple, right? In research, it's the same thing. Let's say you're using correlation. You don't need to use MOs, or you need to use SIM as a technique. You can just run your correlation and you can get done things. It's not always a good idea to use very sophisticated software to tell people, see how your analysis is good or bad. It's always the simplicity in a way. Okay, so I mean to say it's always about your research questions, okay, your research problem, and then how you justify it. So my point to make it, it's not always whatever other people use, you should use it. It's wrong. You have to look into your research questions. You have to look into your research objectives, and then that will define you which method you should go. You should go qualitative, you should go quantitative and all. So it's very important. Either you're locating a literature, you're locating your methods, you have to be very specific and smart in approach which we use in management, like be specific, measurable, and attainable. So you can use this school of thought here as well. The next step is basically how to evaluate and select your literature. It's important in terms of how chronologically you arrange things. Here, make sure one thing, I'm not talking about concepts here. I'm talking about how you select our we can talk about here exclusion inclusion criteria. What is relevant to you? Basically, you're choosing that as your resource for the literature or whatever source you're following through. So it's as again I said, you cannot include everything in your literature. Hardly if you're writing your master thesis. So maybe your literature is, let's say, 10 to 15 pages, right? So you cannot write or include everything what you've been through. So you have to summarize, you have to be specific, you have to be choosy. What's relevant to you, you have to include. What's irrelevant to you, you have to exclude. The next step is how to organize your literature. So once you have, let's say, a resource, once you have your information, the data, whatever the different studies, the summaries you get through, now you have to organize. So when we talk about organize, is another hallmark of research, that there should be a systematic rigor. Like, you cannot write your literature before your introduction, or you cannot do your methods before your problem statement, right? Everything is okay, because I can hear the second sound. So let's. I just request everybody, please, you can keep your mic off so then we don't get the distortion, because please. Okay. I think we just slipped somewhere. Okay, so we were here. So now the next step is to organize. So when we talk about organizing the content, we are not looking here to the flow. We're just organizing into heading and subheadings, right? Like the broader concept of, I mean, let's say we talk about variable. So let's say, for example, any variable, let's say we have any particular concepts, or let's say organizational justice, right? Then we have to organize what's the bigger paradigm, what's the bigger concept, what's the bigger construct, basically, and then we need to divide or subdivide into particular subheadings, or maybe you can say dimensions. So the organization part should be here, Don't confuse it with the systematic flow of ideas. That comes in a how to synthesize your literature. Now, when I'm talking about how to synthesize your literature, basically I'm talking about there should be articulation among your work. The literature that you are doing, that should be a flow or synergy in terms of, we call it articulation as well. So that should be synthesized. Now, there shouldn't be a repetition in terms of what you're discussing over and over, because it's really bother the reader if you are telling the same thing over and over. So all those, not just grammatical issues, but in terms of areas, in terms of concept, okay, in terms of fluency, that thing should be there. So then we have to synthesize, mean a very neat and clean work, where concepts are relating to each other. Let's say you're finishing the passage with a concept and then you're starting something new in another passage. That is not required. So you need to be more systematic in approach. So there should be a flow in the work. So the reader shouldn't get confused by ending up somewhere or getting lost when reading your work. The last part, that's once you gather all this material, then you would like to complete your literature and you write. So this is basically the whole idea was, it's a traditional way of doing the literature. Now I'll just proceed through.
Sorry for interruption, Dr. Noor. Can we continue
Please.
after login again, because we have less than 1 minute for this meeting?
Really? How does it happen?
Actually, this is 40 minutes version of Zoom, so we have to log in again.
Okay.
Yeah, all of the participants. Yeah, the same password, the same link, and with the same passcode, right? Everybody.
Well, we have a quick break then.
Yeah. Okay. So please rejoin again, all of you, please, the participant. Thank you. Thank you.